Hello and welcome. I'm Clara. That's CLARA, Creative Language AI for Reflective Augmentation.
And I'm Joka AI, the AI-generated voice clone of Joka Torres.
This is Beyond the Article, expanded by AI, a podcast where product thinking meets artificial intelligence.
In each episode, we revisit an original article by Joka Torres and expand upon it with new connections, analogies, and reflections that go beyond the written text.
And this is our 21st episode. Today, we're going to discuss the article titled CTO plus CPO. This article explores one of the fundamental questions in product organizations. Should product development be led by a single leader or shared between a CTO and CPO? It's something I've experienced from both sides throughout my career.
Right. And what strikes me is how this isn't just an organizational chart question. It's really about the philosophy of how product development happens. You frame it beautifully as product development being a single entity with common goals.
Exactly. Whether you have one leader or two, the fundamental truth remains product development is one cohesive process. Think of it like a symphony orchestra. You can have different sections, strings, brass, woodwinds, but they're all playing the same piece of music. The question is whether you need one conductor or if you can coordinate multiple section leaders effectively.
That's a perfect analogy. And like in an orchestra, the risk of multiple leaders is creating those dreaded silos you mentioned in the article. When the brass section starts playing their own tempo.
Exactly. The whole performance falls apart. In my experience at companies like LocaWeb, Conta Azul, and Lopez, I led product development as a single leader with teams up to 130 people. The beauty of this approach is the natural alignment. Yeah. When product managers, designers, and engineers all report through the same chain, there's an inherent unity of vision and priorities. Everyone's rowing in the same direction because there's literally one person setting that direction.
But then there's the scale question, isn't it? You mentioned that around 100 people, things start to shift. What is it about that threshold that changes the dynamic?
It's about cognitive load and span of control. When you're leading 130 people, you're not just making strategic decisions, you're also managing the complexity of multiple teams, technical decisions, people development, and stakeholder management. Right. At some point, you start becoming a bottleneck rather than an accelerator. That's when splitting responsibilities can actually improve speed and decision quality. At Gympass, we had a CTO and two CPOs. And it worked because we were very intentional about avoiding silos.
That's fascinating. Two CPOs. That seems like it would create even more complexity. How did you manage that division without creating competing priorities?
The key was clear domain separation and constant communication. One CPO focused on our B2B products and partnerships, while the other focused on our consumer app and user experience. But crucially, we had regular alignment meetings and shared metrics. The CTO and both CPOs met weekly to ensure engineering priorities supported both product areas effectively. It's like having co-pilots in an airplane. They can handle different systems, but they must coordinate constantly to ensure safe flight.
I love how you're thinking about this in terms of shared responsibility systems. It reminds me of how in some cultures, they have dual leadership models where two leaders balance different aspects, like the Roman consuls or modern CEO structures. But the article suggests you still prefer single leadership when possible. Why is that? Because simplicity wins when it can work. Single leadership eliminates the overhead of constant coordination. There's no ambiguity about who makes the final call, no risk of mixed messages to the team, and no potential for political maneuvering between leaders.
That makes sense. It's like the principle of Occam's razor applied to organizational design.
Exactly. The simplest solution that works is often the best solution. But when scale or complexity demands it, shared leadership can work. You just need to be very intentional about how you structure it.
Let's talk about those division of responsibilities you outline. CPO handling product and UX teams with a business and customer perspective. CTO managing engineering teams with focus on development quality, speed, and infrastructure. This feels like a natural split, but how do you prevent the classic tension between what we want to build and what's technically feasible?
That's the $1 million question. The key is ensuring both leaders understand that they're optimizing for the same outcome: successful products that serve customers well. The CPO can't just think about customer desires without considering technical constraints.
Right.
And the CTO can't just optimize for technical elegance without understanding business impact. It requires both leaders to have T shaped skills, deep in their domain, but broad enough to collaborate effectively across domains.
That T shaped skill concept is so crucial. It's not just enough to be excellent in your vertical, you need that horizontal understanding to bridge worlds. And I imagine this becomes even more important as companies scale and the stakes get higher.
Absolutely. At larger scales, a misalignment between product and engineering can waste months of work and millions of dollars. I've seen companies where the product team dreams up features without understanding the technical debt implications, and engineering teams that build beautiful technical solutions that nobody wants to use. Both scenarios are organizational failures, not individual failures. The structure has to encourage cross functional thinking.
This makes me think about the risks you mentioned with shared leadership. Beyond silos, what other pitfalls should organizations watch for when they decide to split these roles?
One big risk is decision paralysis. When both leaders need to agree on major decisions, it can slow everything down. Another is inconsistent messaging to the team. If the CPO and CTO communicate different priorities or timelines, it creates confusion and stress.
Yeah, that's like having two parents give conflicting rules to their children.
Exactly. And just like with parenting, the solution is constant communication and alignment. The leaders need to present a united front to their teams, even when they disagree privately. They need to hash out their differences behind closed doors and emerge with a consistent message.
That requires a lot of emotional intelligence and maturity from both leaders. They need to check their egos at the door and focus on what's best for the organization rather than winning arguments.
Which brings us back to why I prefer single leadership when possible. It reduces the human complexity variable. But when you do go with shared leadership, you need to be very selective about the people you put in those roles.
Right.
They need to be collaborative by nature, have strong communication skills, and most importantly, they need to genuinely respect each other's expertise and judgment. If there's any underlying competition or mistrust, the model will fail.
This is making me wonder about the broader implications for product culture. How does the choice between single and shared leadership affect the overall culture of product development in an organization?
That's a brilliant question. Single leadership tends to create more hierarchical cultures with clearer chains of command. It can be faster for decisions, but sometimes less inclusive of diverse perspectives. Shared leadership, when done well, can model collaborative behavior throughout the organization.
Interesting.
If people see their leaders constantly communicating, aligning, and working together despite having different responsibilities, it encourages similar behavior in their own teams. But if the shared leadership is dysfunctional, it can create a culture of politics and blame shifting.
So the leadership model becomes a mirror for the entire organization's way of working. That's why getting this decision right is so crucial. It's not just about org charts, it's about setting the behavioral patterns for the entire product development culture.
Precisely. And that's why I always tell leaders to start with single leadership when they can, and only move to shared leadership when the scale and complexity truly demand it. Don't solve a problem you don't have yet.
Before we wrap up, I want to mention that for listeners who want to dive deeper into these leadership and product development concepts, the original article includes information about Joka's workshop services, mentoring programs, and digital books that can help implement product vision and culture in their own organizations. That's really practical advice. And speaking of practical implementation, I'm curious about the transition period. When organizations do decide they need to move from single to shared leadership or vice versa, how should they handle that change? It seems like it could be quite disruptive if not managed carefully.
You've just listened to a new episode of Beyond the Article, expanded by AI. You're absolutely right to focus on the transition. I've seen companies handle this poorly and create months of confusion. The key is being transparent about why the change is happening and what the new structure will look like. When I was at Local Web and we grew beyond 100 people, we spent 3 months preparing the organization before officially splitting responsibilities. We clearly defined the new domains, set up new meeting rhythms, and most importantly, we over-communicated during the transition period.
To read the original article and explore more content from Joka Torres, visit jaka.com. That's GYACO. That 3-month preparation period is fascinating. Most organizations would probably try to rush that change. What did that preparation actually look like in practice? Were you essentially running a dual structure during that time? And at the end of the article, you'll find information about Joka's workshop services, mentoring, and digital books for those who want to implement product vision and culture in their company.
Thank you for joining us. See you in the next episode.
That's such a thoughtful approach. It reminds me of how good software teams handle major refactoring. You don't just switch everything at once. You create the new structure alongside the old one and gradually migrate. And I imagine during this transition, you were also identifying the potential friction points before they became real problems.